Team, can we have all of our participants enter the session? Yes, request you to kindly share the screen also. So very warm welcome to one and all present out here. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's a lovely winter afternoon and time to begin with our exciting series, a series of its kind, To the Point. Saying what you mean, being concise and keeping it simple is what our today's session, To the Point, is all about. With the regular flow of webinars and online learning platforms, participants are also looking at content that makes a solid point and answer their queries straight away. To the Point is a short and direct style of information presentation. Thank you for joining HRAI's one more unique and futuristic series on To the Point, where our experts will be purely focusing on what our participants want and give them what they are here for. Request all our participants to kindly follow the webinar guidelines flashed in the chat window. We are focused in having an effective session and your feedback will help us. We will be running a poll before the Q&A session. Request all our participants to kindly give your feedback on the session. I now take the privilege to introduce our esteemed speaker for our today's session, Mr. Prasenjit, who is the co-founder director, who is the founder director of the Great Place to Work Institute India. Mr. Prasenjit has over 2 decades of experience in Indian and multinational corporations like HSBC, Grow Talent, Eicher Consultancy Services, Siemens, and Crompton Greaves. Prasenjit has worked closely on an internal HR consultant and an external consultant with senior leadership teams at various organizations in the area of change management. Mr. Prasenjit was the CEO, the Great Place to Work Institute India till 2021. GPTW Institute is the world's leading institute doing research in creating great workplaces. In his previous stint in consulting, Prasenjit has worked widely in various areas in HR and in service quality and TQM in industries ranging from telecom, cement, heavy engineering, automotive components, dairy products, software, hospitals, and hotels. Mr. Prasenjit has done his MA in Personal Management and Industrial Relations from Tata Institute of Social Science and is married to Pooja, who is an MA in Family and Child Welfare, working as a freelance consultant to social and non-governmental organizations. You can also follow him on LinkedIn. The link for the same has been shared in the chat window. Next, I welcome the moderator for today's conversation, Ms. Sindhu Kalyansundaram, founder, Ignite Academia and Sarva Happiness. Sindhu brings in rich experience in organization development and management consulting. Her experience spans across retail, banking, and financial services, loyalty marketing, FMCG, IT consulting, agriculture, BPO, manufacturing, engineering. Having worked across India and the United Kingdom with GE, Nestle, Infosys, Cognizant, New Look Retailers, Athenian International, she is the founder of Ignite Academia and Serve Happiness. She helps organizations enhance employee happiness levels as well as effectiveness. Most importantly, she works in enhancing organizations to create a sense of belongingness for their people. She has worked with global audiences and cultures. Some of the companies she has delivered workshops are Biocon, Aditya Birla Miniacs, HCL Technologies, Marico, Larsen & Turbo, L&T Valves, Cesar Care, Tesco, ELGI Equipments, and many more. She holds a postgraduate degree in Marketing and Information Technology from SP Jain Institute of Management and Research, Mumbai. You can also follow her on LinkedIn. The link for the same has been shared on the chat window. Without taking much time, I now hand over the platform to Ms. Sindhu. Over to you, Sindhu.
Thank you, Peter, and a very good afternoon to everyone present here. It's always nice to be back at a HRAI discussion. We are in the midst of the first month of the new year, and of course, we have a lot of dreams considering how the last 2.5 years have spanned out. And the people whom I've been interacting with, the companies that I've been talking to, have their own set of goals, desires, aspirations, call it ambitions, some that did not exist a couple of years back, some that were there somewhere in the closet but have re-emerged. And many of them, many of the leaders, many of professionals seem to have a lot of questions. We all seem to have a lot of questions. We go and ask people for answers. Some give us answers directly, some give us answers indirectly, some don't answer, some take us through a path and let us explore and derive the answers. So I'm really happy to be here with Prasenjit. I think we met at a HRAI forum 1.5 years back. So it's nice to see you back on screen. So the little that I know about Prasenjit is he's a man full of stories. So I'm really looking forward. All of us are looking forward to see if we would get some answers or if you're going to throw us down the path and let us explore. So we'll start off with my first question for you, Prasenjit. It's your most recent LinkedIn post, which really intrigued me. I was really curious, and I remember asking you on LinkedIn to explain what you meant when you said people are a self-fulfilling prophecy. So over to you. We would like to understand what that means. Is there a story behind that?
Thank you, Sindhu. There are a number of stories. For me to share the meaning, I would like everyone in the audience, including you, to think of a person who played a very important role in your life. And if you want to derive meaning in a professional context, maybe you can think of a manager who inspired you to give your best. What about him? At what stage? My story, in my story, I'll go right back to my school days. I come from the eastern part of the country, Northeast, and I studied in those days in what we call as Kendriya Vidyalayas or central schools. And Hindi is a compulsory subject, and that's problematic for many of us from the East and from the South, because for some reason in Hindi, everything has a gender. So if I have a bottle in my hand, I have no clue, but this is either a male or a female, and depending on that, how I construct the sentence is going to be different. Till class 9th, I remember class 9th, my class teacher was the Hindi teacher. She would look at my report card, I'll get 80 or 90 in many of the other subjects, including maths and science. In Hindi, I would barely get 40, 45. And she would nod in understanding and say that, yes, you have a language problem. And they're very understanding. In class 10th, I had a different teacher. Her name is Kamla Devi. And she came, and in the very first class, I remember distinctly, she told the class, I would like to read out what Prasenjit has written. Now, I was prepared for it because so far, the only time when the class teacher is going to read out what I have written would be an example of how not to write Hindi. Now, instead, she said, Prasenjit, here you compared what the poet has said with, I forgot what was the comparison, but she said, this is so interesting. This reminds me of Harivansh Rai Bachchan's Madhushala. Have you read it? Now, there's no question of reading something which is not in the syllabus, particularly in Hindi. And by the end of the year, my father was going crazy trying to buy books in Old Delhi, near Old Delhi railway station. And I was in Assam, so whenever he would come to Delhi, books which are being read by BA students in Hindi. I got 76% in Hindi in my class 10th exam. I would have got far higher marks in English, math, science, and many other subjects. That 76% told me that I can do anything in life, because getting that was the biggest transformation that I had. And when I look back now, I realize that Kamla Devi madam never taught me. She never called me to say, here is the grammar, rules of grammar in Hindi, here is how you have to do it. But her expectations were so high, and she was willing to see the promise that she saw, which I never saw, nobody else saw in me as far as Hindi is concerned, that I started believing in my own potential. And that is the reason why I say that people are always, always a self-fulfilling prophecy. Sindhu, I don't know whether it is making sense, what I said just now.
I'm just smiling at the way the session has started because I knew there should be a story behind that. And your story just brings about the fact that how someone's trust, someone's faith and confidence on us, without them telling us that they have faith, propels us to achieve so many things that we never thought we were capable of doing. So thank you for that, a very interesting story. So on that note, do you write Hindi poetry?
Oh, I have moved on from Hindi poetry. I love poetry. And I have a whole bunch of kids. At some other forum, if we have the time, I can also read out some poetry in Hindi that I have written. And most of my young colleagues, they have relationship problems, they have problems with parents. And I find instead of telling them, it's a great idea for me to compose a poem, and they can have a good laugh. And my nickname, I must confess, Prasenjit, is too long for them. They just call me PJ. PJ also stands for poor joke. So my poetry also sometimes tends to be quite funny, Sindhu.
This is nice because poetry, I remember this by John Keats. Poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings, and who knows what can invoke these kind of feelings. But on that note, when we spoke about powerful feelings and overflow, I think one of the most powerful feelings that people can have either at the workplace or outside is that feeling of ownership or accountability. Because once someone has this feeling of ownership, it drives them to be more responsible, and it also drives them to take a lot of decisions that they never thought about. And one classic example that I often quote this, and at the risk of repetition, is that famous example of the Taj Hotel, where when 26/11 happened, we saw the employees of the Taj who automatically went and created that human shield. There was no one on the ground telling them that this is what you should be doing. The ownership, the accountability was ingrained in the DNA of all these employees. So what drives people emotionally to acquire the sense of ownership and accountability, either at the workplace or outside?
You know, a friend of mine who at one time was the HR head of Agilent, he wrote a book, and I remember the title of the book. I have forgotten quite a bit of what was in the book, but the title said, Indian parents have Indian-looking children. And the explanation for what happened in Taj is very simple, because that is what they have seen their managers do all the time. We have a survey statement at Great Place to Work survey that says that my manager walks the talk. And then there's another statement says my manager's actions match his or her words. So I was sort of debating in my mind that what is the big difference between these two. And I happened to be in a meeting with Apurva Purohit, who in those days was the CEO of Radio City, then became president of Jagaran, and now is an entrepreneur. And she explained it beautifully. She said that, Prasenjit, in Hindi, there is a song that says, Jo vada kiya wo nibhana padega. And to the audience, whoever understands Hindi, they will understand what it means. Jo vada kiya wo nibhana padega. And then she turned back and she asked me, why do you think the lyricist did not say, जो वादा किया वो करना पड़ेगा? Because there are कुछ वादे ऐसे होते हैं जिसे किया नहीं जा सकता है, जिनको जिंदगी भर निभाना पड़ता है. So as a leader to your team, there are some behaviors which you have to live 24/7 every day. This is not something that you say from a podium in an open house. And I think if Taj employees behaved in a particular manner, I'm sure they would have plenty of people who would have, shown that particular behavior. And of course, when you talk about accountability, I already talked about the power of expectations. I remember I was interviewing a CEO of Vertex, which is another company, and I asked him, who is the manager who inspired you to give your best? He said, my very first job, I was in telecalling in a BPO. And during my training, the senior manager walked in and he said, oh, by looking at my name, he said, your brother is also working with us. So he was, so he said, yes. And his brother's name is Aman. And he said, Gagan, Aman is one of our best performers. And I'm so happy that his brother has joined and we have such high expectations from you. So I think, frankly, this is a funny thing that happens with people, that they live up to the kind of expectations that you have, and your first set of expectations is without basis. And when you look at people who really inspired you to give your best, you will realize that almost all of them had high expectations, but they had belief in your potential, a belief which was not backed up by your past track record. It was never the case that you actually have been doing it successfully 10 times. Now, therefore, they have given you this responsibility. That is not the incident that comes to your mind, right? Yeah, Sindhu, anything else that you would like to add on accountability? Of course, Daniel Pink talks about, he talks about purpose, he talks about autonomy, and he talks about mastery. But I suspect all of you, the people here already have read his book.
Now, when you said about ownership and accountability, like you said, it's about being surrounded and being or seeing the people who are walking the talk. And that becomes second nature. So much so that we either emulate or we get inspired by those people, or because we're constantly in that environment, it becomes habitual. So in an organization, when we talk about ownership and accountability, you have a team that shares ownership, accountability. So in such cases, how are you going to measure individual performance or contribution when a team shares ownership?
That's a very good question. And let me see if I can change my view and have both of us in a larger screen. I don't know who is controlling this, but there is something called a spotlight. You can probably put two of us. But okay, I have changed it and I can see you on my screen. So you are talking about individual accountability within a team. I am reminded of a song again, Sindhu. And the lines, I don't remember the entire song. It was Patta Patta Bhuta Bhuta, Hal Hamara Jane Hai. And there is the next line I think is very interesting. Jane na jane, gul hi na jane, baag to sara jane hai. So the only person who may not know about your performance fully is you, because you have some biases of your own, or your boss, because your boss is the gardener and he is attending to you only part-time. He has got many other plants in the garden to attend to, but the garden knows. And I think this is something we miss out all the time. The biggest difference between, let us say, the chimps, who are the closest that we have in the evolutionary ladder, they are 98.5% of our DNA is common. But the biggest difference between the chimps and the human beings is that never in the history of this planet would you have ever seen 5, let us say, apes all holding on to a big log, which is too heavy for one of them to transport, and all five of them are doing it, but you will see five humans doing it. So therefore, the ability to take, let us say, collective action towards a common goal is only a human being kind of trait. When I say that, some people say ants also have it. So therefore, take it with a little bit of pinch of salt. But the big difference is when five people are carrying on a log and this is a collective team effort, how do I know that is there a freeloader? Is there somebody who is only pretending to pull that weight and is actually not pulling that weight? Now, the problem of the freeloader is what people have been talking about for a very long time. And for that, the unique solution is that people and the behavior of people are driven more by reputation and less by rewards and punishment. So what we do in our organization, for example, is that we have different teams in the quarterly meeting. Before we start the meeting, each team actually does a ranking of who they think has the most impactful contribution in their team. We don't disclose the bottom 50% in terms of ranking, but we do disclose that these are the people who are in the top half. And when everyone sees it, then they do a multi-voting on who they think are the best performers within the organization. We have some amazing results because we find that people actually care far more about being voted by their colleagues than they care about whether they got 5% extra in their performance appraisal. And to my mind, when you talk about driving accountability, we sometimes do not use the power of the team's perception and the fact that building reputation is so important for most people. Sindhu, am I making sense? But you have to please also give your views on if you think there is something else that I have missed out.
I like the statement that you said people are driven by reputation. And why I like that is because even as children, unconsciously, there is this trait. What is my teacher thinking about me? What are my friends thinking about me? Somewhere it just falls in. And as we grow big, right, when we go into a conference, for example, who is looking at me? Am I speaking well? Am I making sense? Do people like me? And the way we think people see us is something that really drives us. It could drive us to do the best. It could drive us to look deep within ourselves. But as long as it drives us to be constructive, that's great. And I like the way you said that probably drives people to also take more ownership. Because somewhere when people are introspecting and assessing, that's where the Johari window also comes in. Is there an unknown spot that I don't know and others don't know? Great. So as you're talking about the impressions that we are leaving on people, there's generally when I go to companies, when we talk about managers, is something that we always see, that people are the brand ambassadors of a company, right? So you go for an interview, we may not even remember the name of the interviewer, but we'll definitely remember, I went for an interview with that company and I had a great experience. I didn't have a great experience. I call up a contact center, a call center. I might not remember the agent's name, but I will definitely know that whether this company gave me a great experience or not. And that's something I think every employee needs to imbibe. So when it comes to leaders and managers, apart from them being so-called brand ambassadors of organizations, what other responsibilities or ownership do you think should naturally come along with being a great manager?
I think that's a very good question. But before I answer that question, I would like you to answer one of my questions. And, you have talked about effect. In a nutshell, you want to know what does a great people manager do differently from, let us say, other managers. So think of a time, Sindhu, when you felt you have worked with a great manager yourself, who inspired you to give your best, and you were very happy working with this person. So tell us, what exactly was this person doing, and is there any example or story that you'd like to share, which tells us why this person was a great people manager, Sindhu?
Okay, so I have this story from my very first company, GE, and I would always, I hold that company very close to my heart. GE Capital was a call center, and this was in the early 2000s, fresh out of college. The stress levels were very high because you got to work in the night shifts, and you got to speak to customers in the US and Canada, which means the accent has to be neutralized. Sharon was a call center agent, and she went through a 21-day training program. And she then started understanding what it meant to speak to customers in the US and Canada. Now, biologically also, when you suddenly shift to a night shift, it starts working on you because you're half sleepy, you're not sleepy. And at the same time, you're speaking to customers who might shout at you for no fault of yours. And all you have to do is say, I'm sorry, I apologize for no fault of yours. So that was the kind of environment. And the company was very strict about quality, which meant that a call center agent cannot hang up on a customer. That's rule number one. Rule number two, a call center agent cannot be rude to the customer. And if this is found, a pink slip would be given, and 3 pink slips, and the agent is out of the company instantly. So I remember there was this day when Sharon walked in, and she received an email saying that she's the best performer of that month. And she was called for this rewards and recognition function. And she went there, she got the award, and she came back. She was very happy. And then she wore her headset. And as she was wearing it, she saw her manager, Denzel, go by. And he asked her, hey, do you have a minute? So she said, yes. And she was very happy because she thought Denzel's going to congratulate her for the award. So she walks into the cabin, and Denzel offers her a seat, and she sits down. And Denzel says, I have something for you. And he switches on the tape recorder. And there is a call which got recorded the previous day, which is now playing in the room. And in that particular call, Sharon is talking to a customer. The customer is yelling back at Sharon for no fault of hers. The call goes on for some time. And at one particular point, Sharon loses her composure and yells back at the customer and disconnects the call. So 2 things which are forbidden. And Sharon is sitting in the room. She listens to the call and she realizes, oh my God, I'm done for. And she breaks down at that moment. So what Denzel does next is walk behind so that he gives her that space to cry, because it's not very easy for her to cry in front of him. So he walks out of her line of vision, gives her the space to cry, offers her tissues. And after 5 minutes, he asks her, would you like to have a cup of coffee? And she looks at him gratefully. And he said, let's go. So they go to the coffee machine and he asks her, do you like your coffee with milk? Do you like it black? How much sugar do you need? Mixes 2 cups of coffee. And then he takes her down to the building and he says, let's go for a walk. And they take a good 15-minute walk, and all through he asks her, what books are you reading? How is your MBA entrance preparation going? How are your music classes going? All that without touching on the topic. And 15 minutes later, he looks into her eyes and he says, Sharon, I have a lot of trust on you. I know you will never let me down. And that's it. You know, at that moment, she had this immense sense of positive guilt that, oh my God, I've let my manager down. He never said one word about it. And all he said was, I trust you. So she went back to her desk, wore her headset with a resolve. And for the next 6 consecutive months, she was the top performer of the organization. And Sharon was the nickname of Sindhu Kalyanasundaram at that time. We had to have nicknames. And Denzel is the manager. I would really, I still look up to him today, because as a manager, he taught me that the power of the unspoken word is sometimes more than the power of the spoken word. Number 2, a lot of empathy on a 21-year-old. And number 3, show the way without actually telling you that this is the way. And I really believe he's one of the greatest people managers that I have come across in my career. Someone who very subtly demonstrates what it is to be a great manager or a leader without spelling out these qualities.
It's such an inspiring story, Sindhu. And I think sometimes when we narrate these stories, like I talked about Kamaladevi Madam, you talked about Denzil, it strikes me that two things. One is these people played such an important role in the formative years of our lives that we still remember them so fondly. And when we look at ourselves now, I'm not talking about me, not you, Sindhu. I see there are some white hairs, and my face is not the same face as it was obviously when I was in class 10th in Central School. Years have passed by. Years have passed by since that manager who inspired me to give my best. And the question I ask myself, and maybe the audience might also ask, is how many people have I inspired in the intervening years the way, let us say, Kamaladevi Madam inspired me, or in your case, Denzil inspired you? And this is not just a philosophical question. I was one of the biggest FMCG companies in India, and I did coaching workshops in 2003 for their top 250 managers, starting with the CEO at that point in time. And I realized that in almost 120 odd of those workshops, when I asked the question, who is the manager who inspired you? They were talking about one person. And this participant in my workshop, and that person is still alive and is in the boards of many other companies, retired from that company. I will not like to give the name because the point is not about the person. One of the participants said that, when somebody in my family was hospitalized in breach candy, he came to know. He not only came to visit, he called up the trustee. And he said, I know the trustee very well, and saying, do you need any help? Is there a better room available, etc.? And we are narrating. Now, about a year and a half back in my company, I have, a gentleman who is the chairperson for my advisory board. I was narrating this story to him. He said, Prasenjit, I was the participant. This is my story. Now, the point that I'm trying to make is that by transforming lives, by being a great people manager, of course, you are leaving a legacy. And that could be another question that you can ask me at a later stage. But you are also developing yourself. You are being a leader. And I often ask this question. You talked about GE. There is a guy called Raman Ray in that industry who started many companies. Why is it that there are some leaders who can start a business, sell the business, start another business, sell it, and there are hundreds of people who are willing to follow them, to join them? So being a great people manager is about, about transforming lives, but it is also transforming your own career. You are not doing anybody, any sort of favor by being a great people manager. When I look at data, because I also am the founder and the owner of Great Place to Work, and in the top 100 best companies, 81% of managers are great people managers. And how do I know that they are great people managers? Because we have a proxy. In the survey that we do, there is a statement, my manager cares for me as a person. There is another statement that my manager is competent in getting the job done. So we don't say you are a great people manager just because you care, but you have to care and get the job done. That is 81%. Do you know what is the percentage in companies which are not certified as great places to work, it is as low as 37%. And what is amazing is that 37% of managers in those companies are neither perceived to be caring nor perceived to be competent in getting the job done, which means that they're apathetic. So there is a huge cost that is being that we are incurring because not enough managers are great people managers. But the answer to the question is, what do these managers do, is very simple. It is what Denzel did with you when you were down, when in maybe an average manager would have given a firing or would have at least given you a warning or one pink slip. He took it as an opportunity to build trust. And this is the amazing thing about great people managers, is that whether it is good news or bad news, whether it is celebrations or it is moments of embarrassment, it is success or it is failure, everything for them is an opportunity to build more trust. And that's how they convert potential into performance, because you can never convert potential into performance if you do not have a trusting relationship. We call it Connect, Develop, Inspire at GMI. That is the framework that we use, but we'll talk more about that at an appropriate time. Sindhu?
I think you beautifully summed that. It's about trust, because when someone you trust asks you to do something, you just do it. There are no questions. There are no why, what if, because the person has succeeded. And I think that brings down to one statement. Great managers are those who don't look at their teams as team members, as colleagues. They look at them as human beings. Everyone is a human being, and they connect at a very humane level rather than you are my colleague, you are my peer. And I think that brings a huge differentiating factor. It brings out a lot of these subtle emotions, like you said, care, trust, empathy, sensitivity. I think all these can come when we start relating to people as fellow human beings rather than putting them into slots of he's my team leader, he's a solution architect, she's a developer. Beyond those boundaries, look at people. That brings me to your next LinkedIn post that you put in. I think it was a statement by Mark Twain. I said the most important days of your life are the day you're born and the day you find out why, which is, like you said, a lot about legacy. And somehow that statement correlated with what Norman Cousins also said. The tragedy of life is not death, but what we let die inside us when we live. And I think these two beautifully sum up what it is to leave a legacy. And I have had a lot of people asking questions such as, I don't know what my purpose is. How do I find out my purpose? Or I don't know how to leave a legacy. So question for you, Prasenjit, is, do you have some answers, or do you want to show the way to people who have not discovered what legacy they want to leave behind?
I think that is such a strong human need, and all research points to that. We are way past what people call as motivation 1 and motivation 2. The carrots and sticks kind of motivation that we talk about. And I think each one of us have moments and experiences which are designed for us to discover our legacy or our vision or our purpose. And sometimes we are too scared because we have a EMI to pay, we have 2 children to educate, and so many other things. Somebody made that rule that you have to do all of that and make the bank rich by making sure that your EMI is fully paid off before you can hang up your boots. Let me give 3-4 quick examples. So there is a lady who is a teacher in St. Mary's in Darjeeling, and while taking a train from Howrah to Darjeeling, she notices some slums and is overtaken by a feeling she could not get rid of that picture in her mind, that lady is who we know as Mother Teresa and missionaries of charity, right? Now, there is a guy who has got a Fulbright scholarship from US, and that's an amazing scholarship. He could get any jobs in US. He had an open invitation for a green card, decides to come back to his country, which is Bangladesh, and he is an authority in economics, and one of his visits to a particular to a very small town sees how women are being exploited financially by local money lenders, and out of that came this whole industry, and he started something called as Grameen Bank. I'm of course talking about Muhammad Yunus and the microfinance industry, which we are so familiar with today. Now there is a doctor who went to US again, and then he came back, and he really had no intention of coming back to India or staying here, but he was here, and but he was, and his family was a devotee of Shankaracharya. And the Shankaracharya met him, and when he met the Shankaracharya, he said that, why don't you do something for our country? Because our country needs medical facilities so badly. Now he thought of building a hospital. He didn't have, could not arrange enough money for a hospital, but he finally could arrange for an eye hospital. And as you may have guessed by now, that hospital is called as Shankar Netralaya. It's the world's biggest kind of operation in terms of handling thousands and millions of cataract patients and so on and so forth. And the person that I'm talking about is Dr. Badrinath. So there is a first class, and this one you all know, first class passenger in a train going to Pretoria in God knows 18 some years, and in the cold winter night, he is thrown out of the compartment in the middle of the journey in one station because his color of the skin is not white. Now, you may say that these things happen only to those people. And would a Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi become a Mahatma Gandhi if he was not thrown out of that train in his suit and fancy formal clothes in the middle of the night? Did it occur to him that it is very unfair to treat someone like this just because of the color of his skin? And did it produce a feeling that I have to do something about it? Now, what you do is to be very different. What Gandhi did is very different from what Mother Teresa did, what Dr. Badrinath did, or Muhammad Yunus did. There is another gentleman who created Thyrocare. And there are thousands of stories. These are stories that happen to you and me. It happens very frequently. It is just that I don't think we really look at these incidents as opportunities for us to decide that this is what is going to be the purpose. And strangely, now even organizations are recognizing it, because there are more and more organizations which are talking about purpose maximization rather than profit maximization. And I think the funny thing about purpose is that once you start working on it, then all your sales incentive schemes and performance appraisals and everything else becomes so redundant. So the question that I'm going to leave you with is that depending on what is your age, this is a story which is also a metaphor. It's a parable from Mahabharata, from Ramayana, where I think the story is that there is a snake and it has caught a frog. Half of the frog is in the mouth of the snake, and the frog is desperately trying to catch some flies and insects which are hovering around, little realizing that half of it already is in the grip of that snake. Metaphorically, the snake stands for time. Depending on what is our age, part of us is already been eaten up by the snake called time, and with whatever is left, we are desperately trying to catch some flies which are hovering around. So is that the most important thing for us? Or what is it that we can dedicate our lives to that is going to make it worth living? Sorry if I'm being melodramatic. Over to you, Sindhu.
That was very profound, made us think a lot, especially when you brought up the metaphor of time. So what are we in pursuit of? So would you say that resilience is then a very important trait for us to discover and pursue our purpose and leave a legacy?
You know, the moment you are deeply invested in a purpose, and again, I must hasten to add that the purpose is not necessarily unique, because what the feeling that Muhammad Yunus had when he saw those women, and that Mother Teresa, who was not Mother Teresa at that time, when she saw that slum, these feelings, you may say that they both had, these are called feelings of compassion in both of them, but they didn't decide to, Muhammad Yunus didn't say that I'm going to start something like Missionaries of Charity. So what you have to really be clear about is what deeply moves you. You know, there are some movies when we are sitting there watching the movie without realizing we have tears in our eyes, but not for all movies. There are certain things which moves us deeply because we have a very strong emotional association with that. How that will be channelized in form of a purpose can be very different, even if the emotion is the same for two people. Yeah, Sindhu, if you can just go back to your question. Sorry, I got...
No. I think you were actually leading on to holding on to purpose and find out what moves you. What is it that one is extremely passionate about, where time stands still? There, you don't even have the concept of time when you discover what you're passionate about.
Yeah. And I was just going to add that the moment you have a purpose, the beauty of purpose is, when I started Great Place to Work, we said we will make India a great place to work. Then we said India a great place to work for all. Today, we are very clear that we are at a stage where people are no longer resources to achieve the potential of the organization. The organization is a resource to achieve the potential of people. Sure, you will make more money, top line, bottom line will happen, but the mindset is that the organization is the resource to achieve potential of people. Now, these kind of thinking or purpose maximization actually has another benefit. There is no such thing as failures. For that matter, success, because it doesn't matter what you achieve. The purpose is so huge that there is always something more, and there is no such thing as personal failures. Sindhu?
That reminds me, when you spoke about purpose, it actually took me back to my great-grandmother, who was fond of reading. She was always surrounded with books and newspapers. And I remember she was about 94 when the tsunami struck. And I was doing my post-graduation in Mumbai, and I thought it was a weekend, and I thought I would visit her and seek her blessings. So I went to this house that she lived in, Matunga, typical South Indian locality. The houses were built during the British colonial time. So you had these creaky wooden staircases. I remember climbing in, and she was cooking hot pepper rasam for me from the kitchen. And I can still feel the aroma of that rasam coming out, for a hosteler, that was bliss. So I went in, I saw her, she was seated by that old bench, and I sought her blessings, and we were talking for some time, and she suddenly asked me, Sindhu, do you know what a tsunami means? And I said, yes, but do you know what it means? And she went about, she was 94, and she went about describing what a tsunami is and how a tsunami is triggered. Now, I was really shocked and I asked her, how do you know all this? And she picked out the newspaper and then she picked out some encyclopedia that was near her, next to her. And then she started explaining how she chanced upon it. And the next thing that she did really astonished me, because she suddenly called out to her son and she said, can you get me today's newspaper? I want to check the dollar exchange rate. Yesterday, it was 56.34. I want to see whether it's moved. Now, I actually stood there frozen, because here was someone who was 94, who was talking about tsunami, who was talking about dollar exchange rate, who was cooking traditional South Indian food, who was taking care of her family, all because she had so much passion to learn. Learning was second nature. You spoke about legacy and you spoke about passion, and she was someone who was extremely passionate about learning. And I would say she was one of the earliest lessons that I learned on lifelong learning. Today, that's become a buzzword. We talk about lifelong learning being one of the traits we should inculcate. But as organizations embrace this value, how do you think managers can inculcate lifelong learning?
It's a good question. And many years back, years before we had COVID lockdown and the crisis that we had, I was invited by a well-known IT firm in Bangalore. They had an open house, and they were talking about the fact that they provide so many learning opportunities. So I asked, I said, can I ask a question to the audience? So I asked two questions. I said, how many of you have spent 5,000 rupees or more in the last 1 month on entertainment, on going out and eating out and taking friends and families? Almost all hands went up. And then I said, how many of you have spent 500 rupees or more, not 5,000, but 500 rupees or more on your self-development, on learning something from your pocket? And hardly 5% of the hands went up, right? And this was a big realization for us, because the assumption there was that we have done so well, we have gone to good colleges, we have cracked all examination, and now this beautiful company, which is a great place to work, is going to tell us what to learn, and we'll crack those exams also. And I find that shifting radically after COVID. And I would say that if the generation before COVID, and I jokingly call that as the entitled generation, because the market was for employee experience and the currency was growth and career and so on and so forth. I think right now the market is for relevance. I have my son works with a very well-known global brand in US, except that New York Times had an article which talked about how bad their work-life balance is. And so I sent it to him and I asked him, I said, why are you working here? It doesn't seem like a great place to work. And he sent me a WhatsApp reply, which is very interesting. He said, it's a great place to be from. I said, what do you mean? He said, in 3 years' time, my market value is going to be more than double because of the exposure and the learning that I have got here. So I think there is a shift, and it's not necessary it's happening in everyone. But there are people who have understood the value of learning and how to keep yourself relevant, and are no longer willing to depend on the organization solely to do that. But the big question is, how do you make lifelong learning a habit? And if that is a question, then probably we can talk about 1 or 2 ways to do that. But Sindhu, anything you want to add?
No, I want to listen to your thoughts on how you can make that a habit. Because I do see that every new year people take resolutions. They're all kicked up about it. Hey, I'm going to finish 50 books this year. They go about buying management books. I know people who do that. 2 months down the line, those books are decorating their bookshelves. The people who download podcasts, they get onto that journey, and then somewhere it fizzles out. So how does one maintain that consistency?
I think there is a science behind creating any habit. And if you look at reading as a behavior or as a habit that has to be sustained, it is the same thing. I think let me give an example and then I'll come to reading and I'll give you the parallel. For years and years on 1st of Jan, I will tell myself that I'm going to now walk every day. And then of course, 10,000 steps became very fashionable. I'd say 10,000 steps every day kind of thing. So it wasn't working out. So 2.5 years back, and this was just when I think COVID was starting, I announced that I'm starting a WhatsApp group. It is called the Soulmates, SOLE, Soulmates, and this is these are limited to 10 people, and then there were some other groups also, copycats, which sprung up in our company. But these 10 people are committing that on an average they will walk for 10,000 steps a day. They were allowed 2 weeks off if they got COVID, because we said, we have to be realistic. And we said, since I was the CEO, it was somewhat easier for me. I said, if out of 10, 8 people could do on an average 10,000 a week for 6 months, then we are going to send that entire group to any European city of their choice for 1 week on a walking tour. So they can go, and in most European cities are great cities to walk. And I don't think that is possible in most organizations, because this is nothing to do with your performance appraisal, except that I met a middle-aged man, Subhashish Chakraborty of DTDC. He's the owner and chairman, and he has exactly the same scheme. And he maybe is one of the oldest, but he walks the most. He says, if my people are walking, I know they will be healthy. I know if they're healthy, their productivity will be more and they will perform more. So in his mind, he has put the linkage. But to cut a long story short, every week on Sunday, we'll post that this is our tracker, because we are all there in one of the apps and we can post, and the app itself will tell you that today Anurag has done so many steps, you are lagging behind and stuff like that. Even though 3 people left the organization, so we didn't meet the required minimum 8 criteria, we did not end up going to a European city, but 5 out of those original 10 are even today walking on an average 10,000 steps. This was 2.5 years back, and I am one of those 5. Now it has become a habit. But what has happened is I figured a way of doing it, because I used to go out, then in between they stop people from going out to to Worli Seaface Marine Drive. So I had to do it in my building. Fortunately, in the podium, I could take a walk, but I realized that while I'm walking, I can answer phone calls. I can listen to music. I can go through some YouTube videos. I could do a lot of things, and that became a part of my routine. So you have to make it into a routine so that you understand that there are some interesting things that you do while you are walking. And then something very funny happened. I lost 8 kgs. And people who started seeing me, they started commenting, saying that, oh my God, how come you're looking so young? What is your secret? And that kind of stuff. So I started feeling good about myself. So I'm going to now relate it to learning. So in our organization, we created a structure that one Friday every month, we will devote for discussing one book. We announced the book in advance. For example, The Power of Habit was one of the book, Drive was another book, Nudge was another book. So some of us, not all, but some of us were very interested. They will come and read, and then we'll discuss what are the learnings of that book. And there will be one person whose job is to really read it very thoroughly and also figure out application. Now this happens once a week. Then based on that, what I would always do is I'm going to put some post in LinkedIn. I'm going to put some post in LinkedIn. So therefore, all these things which I do, and I think from the looks of things, you are stalking me in LinkedIn, but all those posts in LinkedIn are all coming out of some of these book clubs that I do. And then what happens is that, I get invited. So HRIA comes and invites me to speak on something. So there is a reward. So there is a trigger. The trigger is that there is a book club, and I would look dumb if I go to the book club and I do not say anything. Then there is a ritual. The ritual is in the book club by rotation, one of us will host a book club, and then there is a reward. The reward is Sindhu Kalyan Sundaram will write to me and say, we want to have a chat with you. And, I like it. I must admit. So if you are not able to create a trigger, a ritual, and a reward mechanism, it will be difficult for you to create a habit. I think Peter is here, so I think that's an indication that we better watch out. Our time is over. Sindhu?
Great. I like that trigger, ritual, reward. I think that really sums up something that we need after coming out of 2.5 years of the pandemic and then setting back our lives. We call it the new normal. We call it being agile. We call it being adaptable. But what is our new trigger now? It could also pave way for us to discover a passion. Like you said, help us leave a legacy behind. Because once you are committed to a ritual, there is a lot of consistency. And once you're consistent about something, you're bound to see results. And that could yield, that could be a flickering light towards your passion. Great. It's been wonderful talking to you, Prasenjit. Nice to listen to your stories as usual. So before we wind up, Peter, do we have some questions from the audience?
So before we take up any questions further, we'll kind of run a poll. We'll capture the feedback of our participants in terms of how they found our today's session. So we'll request all our participants to kindly share your feedback on our today's session. So while you are sharing your feedback, would request you all to also share questions pertaining to our today's session. If any of you all have any questions, please kindly share the same in the chat box. Sindhu, I don't see any questions that have come up. Anything that you have received directly?
No, I haven't, but I have one question for Prasenjit that now that we're talking about to the point, maybe one rapid fire question. Prasenjit, what are you extremely passionate about?
Yeah, I think the last post that you talked about, where I said that people are a self-fulfilling prophecy. That whole thing frankly started with my daughter. And my daughter, like so many people, she has something called ADHD, which makes it difficult for her to concentrate for long periods of time. And our schools are somehow used to 1 hour, 2 hour examination schedules that doesn't work for us. So therefore, the teachers have a particular way of looking at it, because you have to crack a 2 hour examination. And when and this is my daughter, and therefore obviously I love her, and she started thinking that she is not good enough because she's not cracking examinations like others are cracking, right? And as parents, you also tend to be judgmental when you are looking at a report card. And then I said, forget the report card, forget the teachers, forget the school. And if I were to say that she has infinite potential, and in some things she could actually probably be the best in the world, how would she look to me? And to cut a long story short, I started finding so many amazing things. For example, she rescued a puppy. She and her friends did, something very interesting in, during COVID times, of actually taking care of stray dogs and stuff like that. Now, including, she was unhappy with somebody, but she got 5 of her friends to come down and deal with this particular person who was, being a pest. So I said, my God, this is leadership. So you don't have to do people management with people in your organization. You have to start with your husband, with your son, daughter. And most important thing, as far as I am concerned, is can you genuinely believe in the potential of the other person? Because that's the only way that person is going to live up to that expectation. Sindhu?
Thank you, Prasenjit. I think that really struck a chord. It was very interesting, like I said, to listen to your stories right from Miss Kamala Devi. I'm sure a lot of people would be intrigued, or maybe even thinking, why don't we have a teacher like her? All your stories, especially when you concluded by saying it's important to have a trigger, ritual, consistency, and commitment. Listening to your soulmates. Literally soulmates, I would say that was an interesting pun. There were a lot of takeaways around ownership, around accountability, how to incorporate lifelong learning. Thank you very much. And I would also like to thank the audience. It's been fantastic, as usual, to be back at HRAI and interacting with all of you. So thank you very much. Would like to interact with all of you once more. Wish you all a fantastic evening. Thank you, Prasenjit, for patiently answering all the questions with your own flavor of stories. I'm sure you still have a truckload more of stories to go. Maybe another HRAI session, Peter, on a different context, and we'll get to listen to all your stories. So thank you so much. It's been wonderful interacting with you.
Thank you, Sindhu. And I must really compliment you because with little bit of interaction that I've had with you, you have amazing wisdom. And I have been telling you that I want a role reversal. I want to ask more questions and more answers from you, but hopefully next time. Thank you, Peter, and all your colleagues for inviting me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. What an amazing conversation. Thank you, Sindhu, for taking us through this insightful session. And thank you, Mr. Prasenjit, for brilliant responses to the point and with beautiful live examples that you have shared. I'm sure all our participants have had a lot to learn from this. To all those who wish to learn, grow, you can access our recordings of our today's session on our YouTube link, which is shared in the chat window. Let us all thank our association members for supporting us and helping us reach out to all our passionate people, that is Geisha, NASSCOM COE, Telgro, TLE, WICCI, LinkedIn Local, Ahmedabad, and India for supporting HRAI events. Once again, on behalf of HRAI, I want to thank Mr. Prasenjit and Ms. Sindhu for such a wonderful session. We hope to see you both again very soon. Do join us for our next event, which is a masterclass series, where we have 5 masters sharing their learnings and experience with us starting from the 23rd of Jan, 2023. Till then, keep learning. See you soon. Stay safe. Take care and bye for now. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you, Sindhu. Thank you, Zeenat. Thank you, Shyam. We can hereby conclude with our today's session.
Sure, Peter. Thank you.